Okay. All right. And it's rolling. So we are live here with my good friend Kenji Sugahara. Is that right? Sugahara?
Sugahara.
Sugahara. Awesome.
Yeah.
Kenji, how you doing, man?
Doing all right. How are you doing?
I'm great. I'm great. Nice to I think we've chatted like with FaceTime once or twice, but we really haven't had a chance to talk that much.
Yeah.
Face to face. Never met you in person, but yet you are my number one customer, literally.
Yeah. Well, actually, the second MFD ever built.
This is true. This is true. So when I built the MFD 5000 heavy lift drone, I built the first one for my good friend Jordy Klein as like a test. And then you guys were crazy enough to want one without really seeing it in person. I'm like, man, these guys are awesome. And now we have it. You guys are the first paying customer. So thank you guys again. Really couldn't have done it without you guys.
Yeah, and you knew Mike too, so we trusted you right off the bat.
This is true. Mutual friends here. So Kenji, thanks for taking this opportunity to speak with me. I think today, I really wanted to get in touch with you because I've been asked all the time about this remote ID, and I feel like you are the perfect person to talk to in a few different ways. So perhaps can you maybe tell me a little bit about like your background and then where you're at now and why you're such a good person to talk about this remote ID with? Like, why are you the optimal person to tell us really what's going on with FAA remote ID?
Oh boy. Oh boy. Well, I went to law school. I'm trained as a lawyer. I actually have a bar license, so I can still practice law if I want to.
That's
Um,
so cool.
yeah.
If you want to. How many people have a license if and operate and only like work if they want to? That's awesome.
I don't know. I'm just one of those crazy guys who just loves to do fun things.
Okay.
So it was fairly interesting because before I got into the drone sphere, I ran the Oregon Bicycle Racing Association for around 11 years.
Wow.
So in that sense, what I did was I started using drones to say, hey, this is a cool way to cover bike races.
Hmm.
And then I started getting better and better and better and better and better and better until I sort of burnt out dealing with 5,000 type A personalities and said, forget it. I'm going full-time drones. So subsequently went to that. And the interesting thing piece too is because of my legal background, decided it would be good to get into sort of the regulatory aspects. So I started talking to the Oregon legislature about some of the drone regulations and stuff, and they pulled me in and started asking me for advice. State Parks is doing that right now. And then I started getting involved on the federal level
Wow.
and was invited to the Aviation Rulemaking Committee, which was sort of the genesis or the start of a lot of this remote ID.
Hmm.
And then after that, I got involved working on the ASTM standards, which is a standards body, which created standards for remote ID. So
Wow.
um,
So you've been
there's,
in it. You've been in it
yeah,
since the beginning, really.
yeah, I've been in it since the beginning, and you hear guys like Brendan Schulman and all these folks, and I've worked with them for such a long time. They're absolutely wonderful, wonderful, wonderful people working
Wow.
on.
That's awesome. So when did you get involved with flying drones or UAVs? What year did you come into this?
I've been flying for around 8 years now,
8 years.
so
Okay. That,
nothing compared to what you do because you're like the god of helicopters and
no, no, maybe at one time for a brief, like 1 minute, but then no. But no, that's interesting, and I think the most interesting part is that I feel like maybe someone with your background, it seems to me like just by you speaking and tell me about your background, I feel like your type of background and use case would lead to more like industrial sort of uses, maybe like a LiDAR scanning or something like that. But you actually work main time in the cinema market, right? Doing like
yeah,
commercials, TV commercials, feature films, and you're out of Washington State, right?
no Oregon.
Oregon. That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Um,
No, yeah. But we've totally gotten into it. We filmed like The Waterman earlier this year, which is an Oprah Winfrey movie. We were out in Pittsburgh for a Netflix shoot.
man.
If you see the Chevy Truck Month commercials, we did those.
Oh, nice.
So we've rapidly progressed in terms of what we do, and it's been a hoot. I mean, it's been an adventure so far,
Oh,
and
that's so cool.
going to be great too.
Man, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, perfect. Okay, so I love the fact that you have the ability to practice law, but love. So is it basically your just love for flying drone, for operating drones and everything that comes with it? Does that just outweigh your passion for law. So is that why you do drones full time rather than practice as a lawyer?
Yeah, it's much more fun. I mean, there's nothing like getting a shot where you're coming down a hillside and then you drop in between trees and then fly through a bridge.
Good for you, man. That is so cool. That is awesome. So for all of you out there in law school, just take a look at my friend Kenji here. All
Oh yeah,
right.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah. Oh, and if anybody's considering law school, I'll say ixnay. Go do it.
that's awesome, man. That's awesome. All right. Well, so let's get to remote ID. And so I guess as a quick background, so I guess FAA put in this remote ID proposal, I guess we could call it, the day after Christmas, if I believe. And
Yeah,
it was a 300 and something page document that got released met with a lot of backlash from everyone that I know. Not one single person that I know likes it.
yeah.
So
I read it. I read it, the entire thing.
okay. So what I'd love to do is talk to you. I feel like I hear remote ID talked about only from one side. So what I'd love to do is talk to you about how it maybe affects three different segments. So
Sure.
first of all, how does it affect like you and your business? So how does it affect you as a professional cinematographer going out flying drones as a service provider? And then maybe number two, how does it affect the RC hobby? So people flying model airplanes, model helicopters, things like that. And then number three, how does it maybe affect a small manufacturer like myself?
Yeah,
And then where
yeah.
can we go from there? So I guess, so first of all, what's your general impression of it? And how do you see FAA's remote ID proposal? How do you see that affecting you personally?
So personally, well, just to give you a little background, we knew this was coming because Congress passed a law a while back saying, "Hey, remote ID is super important,"
Mm-hmm.
and that's why sort of that Aviation Rulemaking Committee came together because the like Homeland Security or your person on the street or the police officer, they do have a legitimate concern about what's flying above them.
Sure.
If somebody's like flying to 10 feet off the off my lawn,
Mm-hmm.
I'd be a little bit concerned too. I
Sure.
have kids. You don't want something buzzing around, just checking stuff out. Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. So it's completely legitimate. There's a security concern, but there's ways to address it that don't go overboard,
Mm-hmm.
which I think sort of what came out of the NPRM,
Okay.
what it does, and just to be upfront, there were some significant issues that I spotted because they didn't follow some of our recommendations from the Aviation Rulemaking Committee.
Mm-hmm.
Because what we did in that committee was sort of come up with some proposals, which was sort of a balance between law enforcement needs versus our privacy and the needs of the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And the NPRM really didn't reflect that, which is truly unfortunate. Uh, and I think what happened was DHS came in as the 800-pound gorilla and said, "FA, you're going to do this. We want persistent, pervasive sort of surveillance of all the UAS activity in the United
Right.
States," which I think is just way too
So
much.
you were part of,
Um,
I guess to bring it back. So you were part of a committee that helped create these rules, the set of rules.
Recommendations that the FAA took into consideration when they were drafting the rules.
Okay. Okay. Got it. So,
So if you actually look at the document, they reference the Aviation Rulemaking Committee that I was on, and then they address point by point some of the recommendations that they did. But some of the rationale that they gave, I don't think was really that great.
sure.
Or yeah.
Okay. Okay. So that makes sense. So I guess the biggest thing that they're striving for right now is like, as you mentioned, like blanket surveillance where they can know at all times where is every single drone flying. And,
Yeah.
was that ever a part of your discussions or your committee's discussions?
No, 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 not even close. The framework that we had was really coming up with what was context appropriate. Like, for example, like normal 107 ops, you just broadcast and that's good enough, or you connect to a network.
Mm-hmm.
So it was or. If you're in like controlled airspace, then maybe connect to a network because that's where airspace is going to be more congested.
Exactly. And that makes
Yeah,
sense.
and like toys, who gives
Okay, we'll get there. We'll get there. We'll get there. Okay,
yeah.
so I guess getting back to it. So with it written as it is. So I guess at the moment, so right now it's January of 2020. So at the moment there is a comment period, correct?
Yeah.
Where we can make comments for the next month, I believe.
Yeah.
And then at that point, they will go back into their secret offices and discuss more rules. So
Yeah.
as it's
Yeah.
written right now, how would that affect your operations? Let's say if you were to go do a shoot this week with your Inspire 2 or your MFD flying a big movie camera like a Red or an Airy, how would the rules as they're written now, how would that affect your shoot?
So in terms of the shoot, the Inspire 2 is easy.
Okay.
Those are easily upgradable to remote ID, being remote ID
And
compliant.
which would be what would that entail?
So what that would entail is connecting to the network through our cell phone app,
Okay.
and broadcasting.
And that's all you would have to do. Now,
Yeah, and
wasn't there
Inspire 2 set up to do that.
Okay, but weren't there a lot of other provisions written to where you could only fly, was it 400 feet away from yourself in a bubble that's 400 feet?
No. There's some misconceptions there.
Okay.
That's what's called a limited UAS, a limited remote ID.
Okay.
And those are ones that can't fly beyond 400 feet by design.
Okay.
So
what is that?
For those, for that one, what you need to do is what's likely going to happen is you just put in your cell phone and then have it connect to the network remote ID service supplier, and then just keep that connection live while you're flying. And if you can't connect, you can't fly.
But what kind of an aircraft would that be? That's the limited.
Like the Amazon cheapies.
Oh, okay. Okay. So that's only so that 400-foot bubble, that 400-foot radius bubble. So 400 feet high and then 400 feet away from you. So that's only for kind of like the cheaper toys and such.
That are designed. Well, like, for example, either they have geofencing built in,
right,
and you can get around it,
right,
or because the controller tech, it can't go beyond that.
Okay. So that clears it up, because I did see that as a big misconception to where people were thinking that they would be locked into 400 feet flying. Okay. So that helps me out. That's good.
Yeah. But there's something interesting here. So that means for most of the hobbyists and your heli guys, they're going to fall into two camps.
Mm-hmm.
One camp is they have to do standard remote ID, which means they have to get it if they don't have capability to connect to the network, get a little dongle or whatever and shove it on, or they have to fly at a sort of a FAA recognized area.
Okay.
So those are really only your two options.
Okay. All right. We'll get to those in just a sec. I want to beat you hard on how this changes the flight ops for the commercial guys still. Like I still want to try to stay on this, because the hobby industry guys, man, those guys are so scared. I want to give them their proper their proper time. So you mean to tell me that if you were to fly, so with remote ID and all the noise that I'm hearing, the only difference would be that you would have to connect to a network for doing a commercial or LiDAR scanning or, normal like flight ops right now. That's the only difference. You would have to connect to the network, and that's the aircraft would have to be able to broadcast its own wireless signal as well, correct?
Yeah.
To the network.
No, so there's two ways to do it. Broadcast. So broadcast is just sending out a signal to anywhere. It doesn't need to connect to the network.
Okay.
It's like a Bluetooth beacon saying, I'm here. Here's some data from it.
Right.
Network is where you actually have to handshake with the network, like LTE, and connect to a service provider. So those are actually the two different types of remote ID that sort of originates from the bird or your ground station.
And so would both of those be acceptable? Because it seems like the first one seems like ADSB. That's what like an ADSB kind of sounds like to me, like where it's just like a beacon of some sort. But the second one that you proposed would have to have internet connection. So I guess I'm failing to understand. Could you use one or two, or would you have to use one or the other, or do you have the option, or how's that written? Because I'm hearing a lot of complaints of people concerned about the hardware. They're saying our drone can't afford another 150 grand electronic device or something. It's like, how would that break down?
Yeah, so it's standard is you have to do both.
You have to do both. Okay.
Yeah, the fortunate thing about the standard remote ID is the idea that if you don't have to land if your network connectivity goes out. All you need to do is continue broadcasting.
Okay, got it. Got it.
Yeah.
So now what happens if I have a shoot where there's no cell service, no phone service, nothing at all?
You just have to broadcast under standard.
So you just broadcast. And what kind of a widget am I talking about to broadcast? Like what would need to be on my aircraft to broadcast?
DJI equipment, most of it can be firmware upgraded.
Okay.
So it's through an SDR, software defined radio. It'll just send that out.
Okay.
And then a lot of ground stations already have cell phones. People use sort of the cell phone or cellularly connected tablet as their ground station monitor.
Yep.
So that'll be fairly easy. The only ones that I could foresee happening are like the MFD, which doesn't have that broadcast capability. The A3 controller doesn't have that built in.
Correct.
So that's an issue.
So yeah, so I guess if that's the case, or like in cinema, the free fly aircraft are extremely popular as well. So like, what would happen with those because they're not connected to the internet?
They need a retrofit module. Well, definitely a module on the bird.
Yep.
And then potentially trying to figure out how to connect to the network using the ground control station.
Okay.
Which is, I think, very difficult, just the way that the Alta is sort of built, correct? Because ground control, it's like a TFG.
Yeah, you could just like a regular RC radio or something. Yeah, it becomes a little tricky, but it seems to me like with the DJI equipment, it's basically not even an issue. It's just going to happen almost without you even realizing it.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting.
For me, the way they approached it was, we recommended through the ARC that connection to the network should only be involved when there's stuff going on. For example, you're flying controlled airspace, or you're doing beyond visual line of sight, or more advanced operations.
Right.
Where,
exactly.
You need a little bit more awareness. So that's what we recommended. But they're saying wherever cell signal is available, you have to connect to the internet.
Okay, got it. So if you are, I'm trying to gather my thoughts here, because initially it's not as bad as I was hearing, or as I was reading, but it's really hard because it's a 300 some page document, and I don't possess the same skills and education that you do with regards to that. So do you feel like it was almost not unfair, but do you feel like that it was just so much that it's so hard for people to digest?
That, and any regulatory action is going to have like a lot of blowback. And I do think they were a little bit heavy-handed in it.
Okay.
We knew remote ID was going to come, but the basic idea is good and it's sound.
Right.
You'll always have people who say, "I don't want to be tracked anywhere," which is a perfectly legitimate sort of point of view. But is it realistic? No. Remote ID is going to happen. Just the way that they wrote it is problematic.
Okay. Got it.
For like the standard for the commercial ops, it's not too bad. There are some improvements that can be made. For example, I think what it should be is network connectivity is only for controlled airspace, like ADSB. You think about it. It's only within the mode CVL. It's like there is some good comparisons. You don't need to know what's going on in Class G airspace. You should only be required to broadcast out there. It's like, who cares?
I'm with you. I agree. And okay, so with remote ID, do you feel like the constant surveillance is necessary, or did they take it a step too far? And I mean, it's like Big Brother, you know?
Yeah, it's totally like Big Brother. You think about it. Who's going to be able to take that action and spot that drone and take care of it?
Right.
Because if you think about it, it's not going to be that desk jockey or that AI in Washington D.C. or somewhere sitting like not away from the actual location that's going to be able to take care of a drone operator or a drone, right?
Sure.
Yeah, and so the only reason for it would be big data analysis, but it's been shown like The NSA and DHS can't process that much data.
No,
It's
it's
impossible.
way too much. But then
Yeah,
would everybody's information be available to the public? So if you're there flying your big cinema rig, and let's say you're filming a movie in a sketchy part of town or something, because they just want to get the shot there. And can anyone log on and see exactly that you're flying there and where you're flying? And can they see that? Like
yeah,
the public
yeah.
can. As it's written, the
Well,
public can.
here's the idea. Um, when you're broadcasting, yeah, people will be able to see. It'll send that signal out, and if you're in range of that signal, they'll be able to see where you are. But if you think about it, Bluetooth and Wi-Fi don't have a huge range,
Right.
so, especially as you get lower in altitude.
Hmm.
So that's going to have less of a footprint, and it's less likely that that sketchy person's going to be able to figure out where you are.
But they'll still be
Whereas
able to see the fact that you're flying a drone. Like they'll still see your
most people
transmitter.
know to see where it goes, so it's like
No, this is true, but they could still see the fact that, like, oh, a drone operator's just right down town, or
yeah,
I'm not even saying a sketchy neighborhood, just people who are nosy.
yeah.
You could be filming somewhere, and people who are nosy could see on a map that, oh, there's a drone operator a mile away. Let me go see him.
Yeah, and that can happen on sort of the network side too.
Okay.
So the way that the rule works, that data is supposed to be made available public, but no like personally identifiable information will be available, and that's true on the broadcast side too.
Okay.
Because one of the most important things we emphasized during the Aviation Rulemaking Committee is nobody should have access to our personal identifiable information, which is
Yes.
like name, date of birth, address, all that stuff. So it's going to
Sure.
be a license plate, a digital
Okay.
license plate.
So as it's written, is that we would still be protected in that way? So as it's
Yeah,
written, people would not be able to see it's you, Kenji, or me, Bobby, flying. Is that
yeah,
correct?
yeah.
Okay.
Because the data is not included in what's sent down.
Okay. So far, it seems to me that if I'm a commercial UAV operator, I'm not so scared of remote ID. It's a little
Uh,
inconvenient, but it's not that bad.
yeah.
Okay. All right.
It's
So
like,
fair enough.
it's like geofencing with DJI. It's a
Okay.
pain in the rear, but guess what?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
flight scenario, we got to unlock it.
Exactly. Okay, that's fair. Okay, so next, moving on to my people. So I work with a lot of commercial UAV operators, like with Watts Innovations, but now I come from the hobby industry.
Yeah.
So as it's written, what will remote ID, FAA remote ID, do to the hobby industry?
It won't be good for it.
Okay,
Uh,
it won't be
it
good for it. Okay.
to say the least. If you look at the rules themselves, you're either going to have a limited,
Hmm.
which is sort of that can't fly
400 feet.
400 feet,
Okay,
which I'll know is for especially more advanced users, hobbyists. That's
it doesn't.
that's
You can't do anything with that.
that doesn't cut it.
Okay.
Or the standard, which means you'll have to have a module that plugs into your UAS or your drone,
Okay.
or even your airplane or your heli. And we know how like balance is so important and performance is so important. So
Exactly.
that puts a crimp on that on that. Or you have to fly at a designated area.
So like an AMA sanctioned field or something like that.
Yep. Yep.
So I feel like the AMA guys, I feel like people who only fly at an AMA site, they probably won't notice anything different, right? Because they're already kind of grandfathered. The AMA has already done their best to, work with the FAA in this. So perhaps would the AMA fields be okay? Like, would they get a
Well,
pass?
here's the thing. I just want to make sure that I get the actual language.
Scanning
Language.
through the 300-page document.
No, 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 no. So the NPRM as written says that at the at the end of the 12-month period following the effective date of the rule, there won't be any more new FAA recognized identification areas. So it's a fixed number.
Oh,
Um, and as of right now, the AMA has around 2,639 clubs slash flying sites, and that doesn't include independent flying sites.
right.
And the FAA has written that they have to review each FAA recognized identification area and approve it.
Oh
So
my God.
think about that. Remember
Oh,
how long 333 exemptions took? Now,
oh, like a year each, 2 years.
yeah.
It took
Now
forever.
imagine 2,639. where they have to do a sort of a security analysis, and they have to analyze sort of the potential uses. So if somebody objects that they're building an apartment complex next door, they can object and say, no, you can't have that. Even if it's existing, that can throw a wrench into the approval process. And
Oh
of
my
course, that
God.
just takes time. Then I've also been looking at, I've gotten into discussion to figure out whether this is sort of, there has to be public hearings on this. I'm not positive whether it does, but if it does, can you imagine how much longer that will take?
Oh, it's going to be insane. I mean,
Yeah,
it's ridiculous. So, okay. So just to recap. So if I'm a hobbyist, there would be three ways which under remote ID I could fly. Number one, if my aircraft has the ability to broadcast its location by internet, and then my transmitter would have to broadcast my location as well.
yeah,
Correct? So
yeah. That's
both.
standard. Yep, that's
Standard.
standard.
That's standard. Okay. So that seems technologically doable but difficult. Like
Yeah.
it's not impossible, but it's difficult.
Well, the thing is, you'll probably have to get a dongle that is either very sophisticated in
Yep.
terms of has a GPS built in
Yep.
and can broadcast, or you have to have something that plugs into your flight controller if you have GPS on your bird.
Exactly. But it
Which
would
is
still, but I guess I'm still, okay, let me go over the three and then I can get back to it. So the
yeah, yeah,
first would be standard, but so
yep,
the drone and the transmitter broadcast its location. The second would be limited, meaning I can just fly old school RC with 72 megahertz and RC plane, but I'm limited to a 400-foot bubble
yeah.
from
No,
me.
it sort of has to be designed so it can't fly beyond 400 feet.
Oh, okay. So like what happened? So an old school trainer airplane, like a nitro engine,
Yeah.
not even legal, not even legal.
Well,
Unless you're at an AMA sanctioned site, once it gets, oh, sorry, not AMA, FAA approved site, once
yes.
they approve these sites.
Yeah.
Holy shit, that's really bad. So,
Yeah.
oh,
The hobbyists got screwed,
yeah. So, but even like
and the homeowners
FPV,
got screwed.
oh, it's horrible. But like even guys doing like FPV racing, that's you're done. FP doing freestyle FPV, you're done. I
Yeah.
mean, I can understand the bigger stuff. So when we have a 12-pound RC helicopter that produces like 10 to 12 horsepower, I mean, we can afford a little dongle or something that needs to
Yeah.
have that,
Yeah.
or a
Yeah.
big multi-rotor. Like we can work through that. But
Yeah.
in terms of like a small FPV racer or something like that, or even a like a Free Sky Tyrannus radio, like how's that going to connect to the internet?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it could, but it's still we're just going down a path of technical, just very difficult technical challenges like ahead of us.
Yeah.
So what do you
Yeah.
propose? What do you propose? The hobbyist, this is really bad. Like this could very much kill like what it's going to do is put the hobby to where it's so hard to do the hobby legally that people are just going to lose interest. They're just going to go play video games or something. It's just so hard.
Yeah. So what I'm going to be suggesting in my comments is just go back to what we sort of originally said.
Yep.
And if you're that concerned about like the FPV racers and stuff, just allow them to go online, just draw a circle where they're going to be and say, hey, this is where I'm going to be at this time or whatever for how long.
Yep.
Then who cares? People going to know that you're going to be there. Law enforcement will, or allow your cell phone to sort of broadcast.
Right.
Or allow your cell phone to connect to the network. Either of those three. I mean, my biggest concern, especially for the hobbyists, are the ones who live out in the rural locations where cell phone signal isn't the best. And if you think about it,
Right.
there's probably not a field nearby. So you got these farmer kids who are like, oh, yeah, I want to get into aviation.
Right.
And what? They don't have network where they're going to fly. They're outside of like dial-up range of Wi-Fi of their house. What's going to happen to those poor kids? So
It's just
for
so
me,
bad.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
just so bad. I'm even thinking of a lot of the AMA sanctioned fields to where like they're nice fields with a paved runway and a
yeah,
clubhouse with electricity, and they don't even have service there. And
yeah.
it's like, ugh.
As long as it's an approved site, you won't need cell signal or whatever. But
Mm.
it's just that process to get those sites approved that's going to just take a long time and is
Oh,
a potential issue.
man, I feel so okay. So I guess at the
But
end we'll go over comments of what people should comment. I guess.
yeah,
Um, Okay. So any for I guess before we wrap up on the hobbyists, anything else to add for hobbyists of how this would affect a hobbyist?
It's just going to make it much more difficult, to be
Okay.
honest. And
Okay.
it's in for the hobbyists that like to build their UAS
Hmm.
or build their drone or
Yep.
build their plane, it gets even worse. The these folks, unless they didn't allow provision to say, hey, it's like a dongle will fulfill the requirements of remote ID,
Right.
and it can be separate, and it's not like they don't have to be certified as a manufacturer or anything like that.
Yep.
Um, that
It could work.
it could work, but the way it's written, you're pretty much exclusively limited to flying at AMA fields. So if you have
Yeah.
your own property,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
still can't.
Yeah. You can't legally. Oh, that's so ridiculous. That's so crazy. So,
For
okay.
example, if you buy your own property,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. You can't fly there. Oh my God. I'm almost speechless. I can't believe that when I read through the documentation, it's so dense that I just couldn't wrap my head around it. But I feel like so far, after speaking with you, commercial operators, I'm okay. Like I'm not too scared. Hobbyist, I just don't even want to buy another. Like I don't even want to play anymore. I want to take my ball and go home and do something else.
Mhm. The other thing too is the requirement for like an ANSI serial number.
Okay.
So like a lot of home builds won't be able to.
Okay, so yeah, so that you just transitioned us. So you just segued into number three. So number three, I feel like we could throw into like how would this affect like myself. Like I manufacture drones that you guys have one and you go
Yeah.
fly it on movie shoots. But I'm also no different than someone, as you mentioned, building their own FPV machine, or somebody building their own kit aircraft or something like that, and then flying in a non-AMA sanctioned field. So with regards to like the manufacturing and the building your own stuff, what would be required? So how would that change me? How would remote ID affect me on a manufacturer side or someone else building their own like home built FPV machine or something like that?
So to comply with remote ID, you'd have to have an ANSI compliant serial number.
Okay.
So that in itself is very problematic because it has to be the aircraft itself has to have an ANSI compliant serial number,
Okay.
which is kind of weird. What they really need to do is allow sort of the components, like everybody has a flight controller, right?
Yep.
If the flight controller has an ANSI compliant serial number, that should be okay. It doesn't have to be the aircraft itself, which would simplify things a
Kind of
lot more.
like a FCC certification almost, to where if my receiver is FCC certified and I
Yeah, or
install
has
that.
a specific serial number that's compliant, then that should fulfill the requirements of having that specific type of serial number.
Okay, that makes sense. So
But then it gets-
how would we get that? How would one get a ANSI serial number?
Oh, you have to pay money,
How
and
much?
then I'm unsure at this point. I don't think they've even determined what it is yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have to get a serial number. So that's the first thing. Okay. And then the second thing is obviously our aircraft have to have all these capabilities to broadcast where it is and then where the transmitter is as well.
Yeah. So the other thing that you need to do
Yep.
is file a declaration of compliance, certifying that your unmanned aircraft is compliant with standard remote ID or limited remote ID,
Okay.
and that can get pretty spendy. The FAA went through an economic analysis,
Yep.
but I think they dropped the ball on it in terms of the actual cost to small manufacturers.
Okay.
So I went through some figures,
Mm-hmm.
and I figured out that it would cost probably close to around $18,000 for a lawyer to actually file that compliance documentation for you to help you draft that.
Yep.
And then you have to have periodic
18,000. I'm sorry. 18. 1 8. 18,000.
18,000.
18. Okay.
Plus, you have to have periodic audits. So every year or every couple years,
Sure.
that's going to probably cost you between $4 to $7 grand.
Okay, and before you go even further, so basically what you're telling me is that if you're anyone else, if you're a drone manufacturer of any type here in the US or even a foreign one, want to sell your aircraft in the USA, then you would have to go through all of these steps in order to comply with their latest remote ID, correct?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
got it.
and for that declaration of compliance, which is required.
Okay,
And for big manufacturers, that's probably nothing.
right. It's
But
just a drop of roll. It's like a roll
small
of tape.
guys, the guys in their garages,
Yep.
which where a lot of the innovation happens, and you
Yep.
think about it with all these concerns about spying and all that stuff, we're
Yep.
supposed to be encouraging domestic production,
Correct.
and this flies in the face of that by saying, "Oh yeah, we're going to create some hurdles, so you can't play in the field and innovate."
So it'd be 18,000, an additional four.
Yep.
So okay.
And plus, remember, you got to test it too,
Yes. Correct.
which is probably cost you around the actual cost using the FAA figures is probably going to run you around $16,000 to $17,000 too.
And who am I testing this with or for? Is it like an agency, like a testing agency or something?
Now, just to show that you could, yeah, sort of you're in compliance with the standard.
Okay.
So, like for example, one of the standard is well, the ASTM, which hasn't been formally adopted yet, but it's sort of the basis of some of the technical requirements. Is Section 6.21 requires a minimum EIRP around all 360 degrees of the far field in the horizontal plane of the transmission path. So,
Oh my God.
to say that and test for it, that you have to go through some testing.
So, okay. Sorry to interrupt, but I guess what you're telling me is that they're constantly trying to push American-made aircraft and say that we're sick and tired. On my LinkedIn feed all day long, all I see is basically we want other options to U.S. to imported aircraft. We want more domestic production, but yet they're making the rules. I mean, 10 times. And I'm not down for regulation. I can't believe, like, I literally can't believe that even like 2 years ago when I first sold you like our aircraft, I can't believe that I, as just a builder in my house, was able to put together an aircraft and sell it. And there's zero regulation, zero nothing. Like, I'm not saying that it should be the Wild West, but it seems like what they're proposing is the Wild. I mean, it's like was the Wild West, but it seems like what they're proposing is just so incredibly difficult to like. How you're not going to, as you said, you're not going to get those tinkerers in their basement or their garage. I mean, that's like you're going to be like $50K to just to not get sued or just to not do it illegally.
Yeah, and if you also think about it, this is a new thing for the FAA in terms of the way they're regulating. You can't sell it, which is quite different from what the regulatory structure is for pretty much all other aircraft. It's you can't fly it, right?
Okay. Wait, so you can't sell what?
Your drone.
Okay. Unless you have this.
Unless you have it.
Okay.
Whereas all other regulatory sort of structures that the FAA has is you can't fly it.
Oh. So they're saying that without this compliance, you can't even sell the aircraft.
Yeah.
So then it's almost more like a firearm at that point.
I guess so. Yeah.
I mean, I'm just trying to think of what other categories of manufacturing this would kind of bring me into. So I almost
toys would be another example. You can't unless it meets some certain safety things.
Sure. I mean, I actually had a conversation today with a gentleman who does kind of safety testing and such, and they were saying, like if I was a toy manufacturer, wanted to get in Walmart or Target or something, I would have to get this drone tested to a certain safety criteria, or this toy or whatever else it might be. So we might be in that same position. So, okay, so that's interesting. So anything else I would have to do, me or anyone else looking to build their own aircraft would have to do?
Yeah. So one of the interesting things is, say, the way it's written right now, you have to sort of retain records for around 24 months after the cessation of production.
Okay.
But that really that's problematic because there's some harsh realities. Most small businesses fail.
Yeah.
So if a small business goes belly up or whatever, you won't be able to comply with it.
Oh, so they're saying
it's another pain in the rear. It's another hurdle. Do you want to have to Yeah.
walk me through this. So so would that affect more the customer or the manufacturer? So if the manufacturer goes out of business in
Oh,
2 years,
it's both, because if for example, it still imposes that requirement after you've gone out of business. That's the last thing on your mind,
yeah,
that you need to file, keep these records, right?
wow,
And then also, for example, if you go out of business, you also can't have those periodic audits, right?
correct.
Which means your declaration of compliance goes out of date, and guess what? Your former customers are screwed.
Oh, so
Um,
okay, so if you're flying an aircraft and
yeah,
then that aircraft becomes almost discontinued, or if the manufacturer goes out of business.
yeah,
So basically if I decided tomorrow that I don't want to play drones anymore and
yeah.
I stop making drones, then you can't fly the aircraft that I sold you anymore.
Yeah. If you don't retain records, you don't have your periodic audits, um,
Wow.
your DOC. So who wants to take a chance on a small business when they know if they go out of business, the potential is there. You can't fly what you have.
Oh, that's really bad. But this is so unnecessary. This is so ridiculous. Why? If anyone from the FAA could please contact Kenji or myself, this is ridiculous. I mean, that's silly. It's silly. Like, of course, if you're going to buy a DJI machine, like, you're not worried about them going out of business. But
Yeah,
if you're going to take a chance on someone like myself with only a handful of people building these things in my crew, like, that's a chance that you take with a small manufacturer. But how else can a small manufacturer become a large one without big
yeah.
money coming in?
And especially when some of the custom builds that we're buying these days are pretty expensive, and it's like
Yeah.
it's a significant investment.
Oh man, that's really bad. That's probably the worst thing I've heard during this whole time. But I
Yeah.
guess it would be the same as if I'm building my own if I'm building my own heavy lift drone, or if I'm building my own FPV cinema setup or whatever, that I would still have to go through all this hassle and retain all these records. Like, oh man.
It's to me, it's not encouraging business; it's discouraging business.
I think so. If I would know this, if this happened today and I had to redo this, I would not choose to make aircraft. Like I
Which
would.
sucks. Make a fantastic aircraft.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. But I feel like because I got in right at the last moment possible, like I got enough leverage and enough steam going to where, sure, whatever they ask of us, sure, we're gonna do it. Like it's fine. But I will say that based on what you told me, I would absolutely not start my business again if these
Yeah.
rules were in place.
Yeah. And what they could do is that they could make adjustments to the rule to say, if a business does go out of, does
Sure,
fold or whatever, that the declaration of compliance remains effective without periodic audits unless there's a fundamental flaw found in
sure.
sort of the unit. So
I think that's fair. I think that's fair. All right. Well, you started me off. We started off not so bad, but now I'm like, oh, this is crazy. So, okay. So now it's time for the comment period. So users from today, I think it was the end of February, right? Till the
yeah,
end of comment period.
March,
So, or early March. Okay. So if I am involved in unmanned vehicles, so whether it's hobby or commercial UAVs or building UAVs myself, what would you recommend that people do in terms of comments, and what kind of message do you personally want to convey? And what do you feel like people should comment?
So the most important thing that you can do is not cut and paste. So don't take whatever other people say and just cut and paste it.
Okay.
Um,
Good to know. Really good to know.
yeah,
I see that everywhere.
yeah, you see that everywhere. The AMA sent out a thing.
Yeah.
People are cutting and pasting and dropping it into sort of the regulations.gov as comment.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Okay.
Um, don't be a jackass. I mean, there's people who are saying, yeah, FAA sucks and all that stuff. Don't do that.
Right.
Those comments don't count. The AMA cut and paste, they'll just count as one comment.
That's it.
So what's important, maybe like the AMA, there's the issues that pop out. you say, okay, here's that issue, here's this issue, here's problem.
Hmm.
How does it affect me?
Yep.
Tell your story. That's what
Correct.
matters. Just say, hey, I got kids, and this can cause problems for them because, for example, if my kid's out there and the thing's broadcasting, somebody could say, oh, there's a drone around, and go find my kid.
Right.
I don't want that to happen.
Exactly. Or as you mentioned, I fly in my backyard in rural, I don't know, in
Yeah,
rural Oregon, and
yeah,
we don't have cell service there, so
yeah.
that's another one. So I think you've brought up some really good comments and some good points, so that for whoever's listening to this, I feel like could fall into one of those three categories.
Yeah, and it's that personal appeal that's going to make a difference.
That's
It's
interesting.
it's because otherwise, just going to be lost in the shuffle. It's a bunch of legalese or cut and paste, and nobody wants to read that. And there's contractors on the other side that are sort of reading these,
Hmm.
and they're dropping them into buckets. So
Okay.
that's why if it's just a cut and paste, they're just going to count it as one comment. But if you tell that story, it's going to be treated differently. And if you can make a compelling argument, it's even better.
Okay. No, that's man. This is some really great advice. I'm so glad we did this. So, if I submit my comment by the beginning of March, what are the next steps that are going to happen? Because I mean, they're I believe this is proposed to go into effect in like 2 or 3 years, right? I mean, we still have time. This isn't happening tomorrow. I guess I should have stated that in the beginning. This isn't happening tomorrow. But what is the proposed timeline?
Well, it's you never know with the FAA and rulemaking. It takes a long time because they have to go through all the comments. They
Hmm.
have to dispose of the comments. But there is a time period after sort of rule implementation till it has to be like fully implemented. So we do have some time, but at the same time, it creates that structure um, of remote ID, and I think it's problematic the way it's written. So don't just also one of the things in commenting, don't just focus on the bad.
Okay.
Just say, okay, here's what's wrong. Here's how we can fix it. Here's some
Hmm.
ideas. Because that's so important to say, and just don't bash the FAA all the time. Just say, hey, they're overworked. There's not a lot of staff. They have pressures from DHS. We know that.
Right.
Um, but if you offer concrete examples of how to be helpful, it's much better for all of us because, you know, there's a lot of people commenting and there's a lot of smart people who are commenting and they probably have some great ideas. Make sure that those ideas come out because the people in the ARC and the FAA don't know everything.
Okay.
We're, they're not omniscient.
Sure.
So come up with good ideas, come up with solutions, and put them on paper.
Man, that's awesome. I feel like that was it right there. That was it. Um, Kenji, thank you so much for doing this. Thanks for taking time out of your day. I'm glad we could record this and put it out on podcast and video for everybody because I had questions about me personally, and all my buddies in the hobby industry are asking me, and UAV operators. So I feel like you answered all of them. Anything else you'd like to leave us with, or your general thoughts on this? I guess just anything else you'd like to add?
No, just that remote ID is coming. We just need to get our input in there and
Okay.
make ourselves heard. This is one of those watershed moments in the sort of unmanned aircraft sort of field.
Yep.
So make sure we do something because otherwise we're up the creek without a paddle. And this remote ID is not going to give you a competitive advantage. I've heard people have said, "Oh yeah, it's good as is because it'll weed out people." No, that's not the way we want to operate.
Yeah, this is
We
true.
we want fundamentally fair remote ID that protects everybody, including us.
I
And
think that's fair. I think it's fair.
yeah,
And you know, one thing I didn't even think of. I remember when I first read it, the whole time, all I could think of was package deliveries is now going to be like this. Sounds like the rules specifically made for the Amazons and the UPSs and FedExes of the world to come in and do drone deliveries. Did you get that sense? I
yeah,
forgot to ask.
that's part of it. If you look at it in the preamble, there's talk about UTM,
Yep.
and everybody has to be part of the UTM. The UTM is unmanned
UTM. Okay. Sorry.
traffic management system, which is
Okay.
like air traffic control for drones, and
Okay.
it's going to be all automated and stuff. It is an important step because there's more and more in terms of unmanned sort of aerial mobility units that are coming online. So it's going to be even more critical because the airspace is going to become more congested.
Right.
But that only happens in urban areas. So
Correct.
going back, it's like remote ID over the network should only happen where it's needed. So it's like just making sure everything's still context appropriate.
So
But
this is a little overkill. A little overkill.
it's overkill. And the rule can always evolve as technology changes. I
Right.
mean, it's not set in stone. It's a pain in the rear to do it.
Yes.
And sort of the rule changes should only happen like once every 5-10 years.
Right.
But the version 1 should stay small, lightweight, and easy to implement.
That's fair. And one thought I had too that I didn't mention was I feel like the tech's going to fix itself, whatever the rule is. There are so many intelligent people, and with the popularity of open source everything. So from FPV guys running beta flight on small $40 flight controller boards, all the way to the guys running a Pixhawk Cube like this thing, or hobbyists running open TX radios. I feel like the open source community is huge, and there's smart people to where I can see this. I can see a $9 item that you buy on Amazon plugging into your open source device, making you now be compliant if you're flying a non-DJI aircraft. Yeah. So I feel like the tech side isn't that big of a deal because I feel like I'm just so bullish on the creators that people are going to be able to do this.
The Pixhawk guys are working on sort of an implementation.
Right, they're good. They're always ahead. They're ahead of the game, and I have zero doubts for them.
They are geeks. They are super geeks, and they're good people.
They're very talented. I give them credit. Yeah. They're so talented. No, it's interesting, and I guess my heart goes out the most for the hobbyists because the hobby I feel like is in for a rude awakening with this. But the commercial guys and manufacturers like myself, I mean, hey, we manufacturers, we got to play ball, whatever it is. At least we're all on the same playing field. Like we'll all have to do the same thing, or we don't.
But we all came from the hobbyist side, right?
Right. We did.
We did.
We can't
ever forget that.
Oh man.
It's like you think about it. We got to encourage our kids. We got to encourage the STEM aspect.
Yeah.
And drones are a great tool. And we have to remind the FAA of that.
I think so. I think that's very fair. Very fair. Well, Kenji, I won't take up any more of your time. Thank you, sir. I really appreciate it. And maybe I'll catch you at AVSI. Maybe I'll catch you there.
If you have any questions, just feel free to reach out.
Yeah, how can people reach you and your company and maybe a little social plug? How can people get in touch with you?
Call Bobby. He knows us. Okay. It's ACAM Aerials. So you can find us on Instagram under ACAM Aerials, ACAMAERIALS, or Facebook. And you can reach out to us. We're pretty active on a lot of the commercial groups and the legal groups on Facebook too.
Awesome. Kenji, I very much appreciate it, my friend. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right, chat soon. See you, man.
Yep.